The country is in mourning as we celebrate the life of the boy from Troy. Memorial services for Representative John Lewis are beginning this weekend in his hometown of Troy, Alabama. The body of the 80-year-old civil rights hero arrived in Troy Saturday morning. Local leaders celebrated his life and what he meant to the community where he grew up. Lewis would become known as the conscience of the Congress. He dedicated his life in public service to fighting against racial segregation and injustice in the Deep South. He walked alongside Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., often facing arrest and violence in the fight for equal rights for all. 6 days of memorials will weave through the many parts of the country Lewis touched so deeply. He'll take one final trip across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama on Sunday, and he'll lie in state in the Alabama state capitol as well as the U.S. state capitol on Monday and Tuesday. On Thursday, Lewis will return to Atlanta, the community he served for 30 years. His memorial service will be held at the Ebenezer Baptist Church, the congregation his mentor, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., once served. CBS This Morning Saturday co-host Michelle Miller is in Selma, the site of the 1965 Voting Rights March Lewis led. Hi, Michelle. Can you remind us what Lewis means to the community in Selma and across Alabama?
Well, he is the conscience of a people, a conscience of a time, a conscience of a movement. He was the humble man who gave a stern talking to segregationists through action and deed. I tell you, beginning with these services and the fact that they are beginning in, of all places, Troy, Alabama, which is really where the beginning of Congressman Lewis's struggle and revolution occurred. Being denied entry, not even given the benefit of the doubt to listen to or to accept his admission or application rather to that university, Troy University. The full circle moment that being there for his homegoing represents, for the university to honor him with an honorary doctorate 2 years ago, and now the president of that university to say he is welcome and will always be. For the mayor of Troy to say I am not worthy, because he was so much greater than anything that I could bring to a eulogy for him. And to be counted among his family and friends was an honor for him. He recalled that it was Lewis's brother Grant who in fact gave him the coaching sternness, and at the same time, while Congressman Lewis was running for that first shot at the Congress. So it was more than just politicians and more than just university presidents. It was family. 5 family members stood up and recounted the life of their brother, their beloved brother, who, quite frankly, seemed to be the kind of big brother or little brother who always made time for them, no matter what was going on in their life, they said, whether receiving the Presidential Medal of Freedom from President Barack Obama or having to run off to meet with his constituents. If he was nearby and in town, he would come by to see them, or if it was simply a phone call, he was there to make it. And really the saddest part of their expression of love and their expressions of farewell was having to say goodbye to that brother. And several of them talked about the last words that he offered them on a phone call was simply, "How is everyone?" and let the family know I'm thinking of them. So truly moments, and it was an hour long, and if you know anything about so the Southern tradition of homegoings, they're much longer than that. But the send-off was true to the Southern tradition in a gospel rendition by a singer who had people up on their feet, singing and celebrating in what she called the happy dance. That was the life of Congressman John Robert Lewis.
A true end-of-life celebration. And Michelle, how will the state continue to celebrate his life over the weekend?
Well, my goodness. So they started in Troy. They come here to Selma, Alabama. Tonight there will be a gathering at the AME church that many people who were part of that march back in 1965 both started that march at, and then who ran and sought shelter too after that bloody beating by the police officers here on this bridge some 55 years ago. That happens tonight. Then there is truly a somber moment, the last walk, or actually the last crossing, they're calling it, of the congressman going over the Edmund Pettus Bridge tomorrow, late morning, early afternoon, in which his casket will go over the bridge all by itself, horse-drawn carriage taking it to the other side. That is the direction of Montgomery. It is the direction that the original march was started, then stopped, then started, then stopped, then started, and made its way through to Montgomery, Alabama. So that is the actual path that will be led of Mr. Lewis as he goes to Lyon State at the Montgomery State Capitol. And then from there, as you well know and you said, it's off to Washington, D.C., where the congressman will lie in state and repose at the Capitol Rotunda and just outside for visitors to have their option to come through. All COVID-19 conditions will apply. So truly a 6-day celebration that people will have an opportunity to pay their respects to this man.
Well, Michelle, we look forward to your continued reporting. Michelle Miller, thank you. Congresswoman Brenda Lawrence is a Democrat representing Michigan's 14th district. She's a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, and she joins me now from Detroit. So, Representative Lawrence, as a Black woman growing up in the civil rights hotbed of Detroit, what does Lewis's fight against racial injustice mean to you?
One of the last public sightings of Joe Lewis was him. John Lewis was standing in Washington, D.C. on the newly Black Lives Matters plaza. He never missed an opportunity to enforce, to reassure, to encourage, and to just push for remembrance of how far we have come and how far we have to go. So many people know about his amazing family, but his family in the Black Caucus, we were so honored. He could walk in the room and it was just his presence was a reminder, you have work to do. And that's what he would repeat to us, never give up, keep pushing. We have so much work to do. I would like to share a moment when I first met him as a new member of Congress. He was in the exhibit area and the Library of Congress on Civil Rights, and he was standing in front of that photo of him being beaten on the bridge. And he was just standing there in silence. And I said, what are you thinking? What's going through your mind right now? He said, it seems like yesterday. We have so much more work to do.
So he welcomed you to Capitol Hill. At that point, he'd been there for nearly 30 years. You began serving in 2015. So did he welcome you clearly saying there's more work to be done? What else did he say?
He always pushed and said, it's important that you understand good trouble. And he said, good trouble is nonviolence. Good trouble is staying true to the mission of racial equality. And he would say, you know, everyone was his brother. Whether he was having a heated debate, which I never saw him lose his temper, but his mannerism and his decorum and the respect that he gave to everyone, regardless of your walk of life, regardless of male, female, racial background, the respect was consistent. And while we're looking at 6 days, you know, in the Black community, a homegoing is so important for us, that for 6 days, the respect that he gave to everyone, that we are going to attempt in this country to pay that back to him. He is so deserving.
So was this an inclusive, a friendly spirit that he brought to the Congressional Black Caucus and to Congress as a whole, or was there a different sort of spirit that he brought?
His spirit was constantly of educating, informing, hopefully transforming divisive or racist ideas or policy. He always wanted to explain what you're doing, the policy. The policy, he drilled that into every freshman. The laws and the policy make a difference in the lives of so many people. Whether you're trying to feed the hungry, whether you're trying to help those who are incarcerated, whether you're looking at, right now we're looking at the unauthorized use of military force. You have to be constantly awake and involved to see where these little arrows of racism are being shot across the bow and in so many areas in America. And his thing was to stay involved, keep pushing. That's his thing, keep pushing. It was so powerful to hear this man who didn't have arrogance, didn't have any malice in his heart, but a fierce fighter, a fighter for justice. And when we did our sit-in, I was so impressed when we did our sit-in on gun violence and how he was standing there smiling. He said, "Brenda, this is good trouble."
You mentioned he was such a fighter. One of his biggest fights throughout his life was for voting rights. We know this year mail-in ballots are going to be a major factor. You worked for the U.S. Postal Service for 3 decades, so you know this topic well. What do you think states and Congress need to do to continue Lewis's fight and protect mail-in voting this year?
This year, we have to stay awake to every effort to suppress the vote. When you hear words like, we don't want to use mail-in ballots, or mail-in ballots is not a good option. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in a pandemic that is getting worse every day. We have to protect the public, but we are a democracy, and protecting our democratic right to vote using the mail, which is a constitutionally established branch of our government, that we protect it. We just found out that there was a notice given to clerks around the country saying that these ballots may not be mailed out in time. We are not going to meet the mailing standard. We're going to have to fight. There's been a new Postmaster General appointed at a time that a person who was a major donor, the person knew nothing about the Postal Service. There is talk about eliminating overtime, and so mail is beginning to pile up. We are in a crisis, and if we want to honor the legacy of John Lewis, the right to vote, voting rights, and fighting against oppression, which we're seeing in the Postal Service right now, we are going to have to fight like we never have, and all voices, all hands on deck. If this man, who was not tall in stature, but was beyond belief in his passion and in his fight and in his consistent message about voting rights. So many people are going to the mic now saying we honor him. Pass the Voting Rights Act. Protect the right to vote through the Postal Service, through the mail. And then that's how you honor his legacy.
Continuing John Lewis's legacy, Representative Brenda Lawrence, thank you.
Thank you so much.